Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Today I'm going to tell you about a book that came out in 1991, written by the Brit Peter Mayle, who has written a lot of basically the same book, but I discovered him through what would become one of my top five favorite movies. This book is lesser known, but it's amongst his better written pieces. It is called Anything Considered. Before I get into the pitch, let's talk a little bit about Mayle and his background. So in 2006, there was a Ridley Scott movie that came out starring Russell Crowe that, in a very odd turn for this pairing, did not involve Russell Crowe punching anybody. It was called A Good Year. I've talked about this movie before. I saw the trailers for it in the theaters that summer. I remember this much. The following spring, I was out grabbing DVDs at Blockbuster one night. It's like, oh yeah, I never checked this one out. So grabbed it, watched it, just fell head over heels in love with it. And just recently rewatched it for the first time in a long time with the wife. And it has aged tremendously well. Top performances from all involved. I will do a full video on this movie later when I can actually edit it together with clips and stuff, because I want to compare it to the book. It was a very, very different treatment from the book. Peter Mayle himself is a Brit who didn't like his upbringing and the beginnings of his career in stuffy London. He took a few trips to France, both for business and later for pleasure, and ultimately concluded that his role in life was to be a Francophile and to sing the praises of the southern wine region called Provence. And so he's written a whole bunch of books that are, none too conspicuously, about a Brit whose life sucks in England, but he goes to France and everything is cooler, the end. Sometimes you get into some adventures amongst rich people. Usually there's a wine tasting, there's a bit of a caper here and there, but that's the general tenor of everything that he writes. Anything Considered, though, is just a little bit different. The protagonist is a man named Bennett. He's an expat. He's got a little bit of money saved up, and he heads down to Monte Carlo with a plan to not necessarily strike it rich, but to find himself gainful employment so that he doesn't have to return to England. Because what could be worse for an Englishman than being in England? Oh, I know. It could be being a climate protester and getting run over by an angry American in his Durango, but I digress. So Bennett puts an ad in a local paper in the International Herald and says, hey, I'm a bachelor, I'm looking for work, I will consider anything except for marriage. Like, literally pay me to do anything. Because none of his other contacts had developed into anything lucrative. Soon enough, he's contacted by a very rich man named Julian Poe, who says, hey, because of the way that European tax laws work, I need to be able to prove on paper that I have spent a certain amount of time in certain countries in order to avoid taxes in other countries. I don't like being tied down, but that's the way the law goes. You kind of look like me, you're about the same build. If you can imitate my signature, then I'm going to pay you to be me here in Monte Carlo. You're going to live in my house, you're going to drive my cars, you're going to sign my checks, you're going to eat meals at my restaurants. Like, you need to leave a paper trail pretending to be me. Perfect. Sweet gig, right? ... Little does he know, Julian Poe, being a rich guy, is connected to organized crime amongst the Siciliani and the Corsicans, and things go kind of sideways from there. To the extent that I know anything at all about black truffles, I learned it from this book, or at least whatever the economic culture was around black truffles 30 years ago, when it was published. What are black truffles, Graham? Are they chocolates? No, you blonde from Provo. There are chocolates that are called truffles because they have the same texture as actual truffles. Truffles, the black truffles, are mushrooms that are pretty much a delicacy, and they're valuable because every year that they are harvested, the following year there are fewer of them. That just has to do with how they germinate and propagate. Them being a fungus, it's kind of hard to cultivate them the way that you would with other mushrooms. At least it was presented as such in this story. You can't farm them. You've got to actually go out and just dig them up wild. However, somebody in this book figures out a formula to cultivate the black truffle, and so it's effectively like being able to do alchemy. If gold is valuable because it's limited, but you figure out how to make gold from lead, you can manipulate the market, and you can suddenly become very, very rich by being able to produce this very rare and valuable staple at will. Julian Poe sets himself up to intercept this truffle formula, but he has it sent to the house in Monte Carlo, and he calls Bennett. He's like, "Hey, you're going to get a shipment tonight. You have to be at the house." Well, Bennett screws that up, and somebody else who knew the shipment was going to be there stole it. And suddenly you've got a caper on your hands, and Julian is threatening. He's threatening Bennett with his Japanese manservant. He's like, "Shimo knows all the karate in the world. He'll beat the piss out of you if you don't go find this truffle formula." And now Bennett has to go tromping around Europe trying to find whoever stole this thing, and he's got to team up with a very colorful cast of characters. I think that's a line that I say a lot, but when I say that, I mean specifically a ragtag group of people with very different backgrounds and skill sets and all that stuff, people that you wouldn't really put into a room unless it was for a story like this. So you've got this stuffy British expat in Bennett. You've got this borderline bikini model Anna, who is also a tank driver. I think she was in the Israeli Defense Force. At one point, they enlist the services of a monastery that is populated entirely by retired CEOs who are also secretly gay, and they use their monastery to hide their wealth and grow wine. It's like grab a bunch of misfit things out of a bag and put it together, and you put together this cast that's trying to fight these different mafias to get the secret truffle formula. It's somehow even more ridiculous than I'm describing it. But out of all of Peter Mayle's books, I think this one is the most entertaining. It's got the most kind of sharp edges to it, and the highest stakes, and it's such a departure from all of his other books that I have read, at least. There's even a fair amount of language in it, which I don't remember there being in A Good Year or Hotel Pastille or The Corsican Caper or A Year in Provence. To my memory, this was the only book that had the F word in it, and so on and so forth. But it was a fun read. It was a really good summer read, and I know we're in September, so it's a bad time of year for me to be making summer read recommendations. But I admired the chance that he took with a book like this after having established himself as the guy who writes pleasant lawn chair books about people who give up a life in London so that they can go live in the wine country and have no problems at all. So that is a recommendation for anything considered. I went back and checked on Goodreads, and back in the day, back in 2009 or 2010 maybe, I gave it 3 stars, probably because of the content issues. I was a lot more picky about that kind of stuff. Now I warn about it is all. But it was fun, and I think it was more fun than his other stuff. It was definitely a better book than A Good Year, which served as the basis for one of my favorite movies, and that's a rare case of the movie being superior to the book, because the movie had no edges at all. Max was just a guy who hated his job, and whoopsie, you inherited a vineyard from your uncle. Why don't you move to France and get a hot French girlfriend, and you'll inherit a secret winery that's worth millions of euros, the end. That was it. So that would be a good introduction point to Peter Mayle's writing, if you were to read A Good Year and then from there read Anything Considered. Anyway, that's it for now. Y'all drive safe. See you out there.